How's it going, guys? Anfield here. Welcome back to a new video. Today's video we're just going to talk about a few tips and tricks you can sort of apply to your game. Some of you may know a lot of this stuff, some of you may not, but I've been convinced recently that some of you may not know this stuff. So hopefully at least part of this will be useful to you. Recent sort of discussions over certain things have made me convinced that this is something that does need to be talked about, but a few of these things, specifically the one I'm going to go over first, don't necessarily warrant a video on their own, so I'm just going to sort of compile them together, and hopefully you guys can sort of pick apart what might be useful to you. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that sort of comes up a lot, and it's come up kind of over the past few years, really, and whenever it comes up in chat, I sort of have to talk about it quite a bit. But it's also been coming out quite recently, so it's still something that people do. So I figured I'd talk about it, and that is automatic fire extinguishers. Now, a lot of people say, well, I can just use a manual one, and I can use a mod or a script or a macro, whatever, to instantly put out the fire, right? And it only costs 3,000 versus the 20,000 of an automatic fire extinguisher, so it's much better. This is not true. It isn't much better. The automatic fire extinguisher isn't better, even though it costs more money. And the reason for that is because it has a stock 10% chance to prevent a fire in the first place, which the manual extinguisher does not have. Also, those mods to put them out, I'm pretty sure are illegal. But whether they are or not, it actually doesn't matter. You should be using an auto extinguisher anyway. So yeah, always use automatic fire extinguisher on all your tanks. Now, some of you may be worried about the economy of this. Well, it's going to cost me more money. There is a reason you see 40 in the depot. That is because you just don't use them that often. Most games and most tanks, you don't get set on fire all that often, and this is a tank that does get set on fire. But most tanks don't really get set on fire all that often, so it's not that big of a deal. You don't end up using it most of the time, and obviously you're only charged when you do use it. Also, the game gives you a lot from various missions that you complete on accident. So yeah, the other part of that is, of course, that the 10% chance to prevent a fire in the first place means that you're less likely to use it, so it actually ends up, just stockpiling them in your depot because you're using them less than you would a manual extinguisher, which doesn't give you the extra chance. So always use an automatic fire extinguisher. Now, some of you, of course, may be using rations anyway over the extinguisher, which is fine, although, of course, in a tank like this, you have to put it over the med kit, like if you have Jack of all trades, like my other video explained. But those of you that are already using rations for tanks to try and improve the crew ability and things like that, you probably already know this. But I figured I'd put it out there because it is important. So the last thing is these two. Now, this isn't as important as the automatic fire extinguisher, and you could certainly end up losing money putting large repair kits and large med kits on tanks, which is why I don't do it, because most of the time once a tank is 3 marked, I just go casual on it and I don't try hard as much. But if you really want to go out all the way, these do have superior speed to repair, which is nice when you're tracked or something like that. Or in this case, 15% crew protection, which is actually quite significant. So it's just something to keep in mind, guys. I can't argue for the economics of this, although I do have 97 large first aid kits. You're more likely to use a large repair kit in a battle, though, because you get tracked. Tracking is very frequent. Losing a crew member is frequent, but not as frequent, but certainly getting set on fire is far less frequent than either of these two. But you can see I have quite a lot in the depot, although part of that reason is because I run standard first aid kits on them anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to go over that one first. That was the primary one, or the reason I made this video, because a lot of people still bring this up. But it wasn't really worth its own video, so we're going to go into a few other things I think you might also find useful. So next up, I want to talk about little ways to improve your situational awareness. Now, some of these may be very, very situational, but the first one I'm going to talk about specifically is more situational, rarely going to be that useful, but I figured I'd bring it up. So it's usage of auto-aim to increase your situational awareness. Now, there's cases like this where the Scorpion is out in the open, has absolutely no cover anywhere, and has no armor. So I actually don't have to look at the tank to kill him. I can just auto-aim the kill. I don't have to look at the tank. Now, if I was in any danger and needed to micro my tank away from him, that's something completely different. But of course I have an autoloader, so I don't need to do that in that case. Rarely will you see that being that useful, but there are situations where you might want to have auto aim kill the tank for you while you pay attention to everything around you, just maximizing your sort of situational awareness. And yeah, it's something to keep in mind. At least you may not have much use for it, but I figured I'd include it, and you may be able to use it in some situations. So the next tip for situational awareness is something that I was asked why I do it on stream, so figured it's worth putting in the video. And it's basically that I zoom out almost instantly after I aim in and shoot someone, such as that, for example. And the reason I do it is because after you've let a shot go, it's either going to hit or it's not going to hit. You being zoomed in isn't going to help it. So I would rather zoom out and see what's around me in situational awareness. So it's a habit I picked up over time, but basically I will always zoom out after I fire just to see what's around me. Now there are certain situations where this is not necessary, or this could impede you, such as being in an autoloader where you have 2 seconds in between your shots. You may as well stay zoomed in. If you're sniping from complete safety and there's nothing around you, in those kind of situations it's not so necessary to consistently be checking your surroundings. So you can see there I shot a T-30 and it instantly zoomed out to check where the AMX was, and there the same thing to check where the T-30 is. So you can see that it's kind of useful. It's mostly for brawling and certain situations like that, mid-range sort of deals where your tank isn't in complete safety. Now, if you are sniping, then maybe it's not so necessary. Although, even still, you could maybe consider it. But, it really depends on your reload. I guess if you've got a really big reload, it's not so necessary. Now you can see there I didn't instantly zoom out, and that's because the T-30 and the AMX were both right in front of me, so I didn't need to check the position of the T-30. It's wonderful to be a Unicum. Get 'em, boys! Get that pesky Unicum. Oh no, the YOLO failed. Oh, it's okay. You got one shot off, and you wasted your entire tank. But anyways, yeah. So it's kind of useful, and maybe you'll be able to use it too. Takes a little bit of a habit, I guess, to get into more than anything if you don't already do it. I don't use shift to go in and out of sniper mode. I always use my mouse wheel, which that isn't something that you need to worry about. But for me, it's just easy just to scroll the wheel back and forth as I need it. So yeah, I hope it's something that maybe you might find interesting at the very least, even if you don't see it as being useful to yourself personally. So the next tip is when you're shooting through a wall, sometimes it can be quite difficult to aim, so you can just again use auto aim, which will always aim towards the center of a tank. So it gives you an easy shot on the side, rather than trying to aim manually on the move, which might be quite difficult as you can't really see properly. And also your manual aim is subject more to ping and other things, and unnatural rises in terrain that might send your shot off. So you can sort of see the top of a tank, which activates the auto aim, and then you can hit through a wall. Now, it's also important to remember that only AP and APCR go through walls. HESH, HE, and Heat do not go through walls, so don't try it. So there may be situations where auto aim is going to bounce off the hull or something because it's going to aim towards the center of a tank if the tank is staring at you. Now, instead of doing that, you can aim with the center reticle. You can see it here, which is one of the reasons why aim point is useful, because it's a little tiny dot that you can use, and you can see that's where it's aimed, and that's where we're going to aim. So a nice shot into the hatch there to do some damage, whereas an auto aim shot is going to pen because it's an M48, and the M48 armor is kind of useless. But in a lot of situations, you may bounce because it might go into a turret front, mantlet, or something else. Unfortunately for the M48, the armor isn't very good, even in the upper plate. Poor M48. But you can see the point is you can actually aim at a tank with your center reticle, even though the actual shot is being blocked by a wall. So once again, you've got a tank that's a little bit further back from you. You can actually aim at the weak point of the lower plate. But again, if the tank is really close and if you start to pull it down, then you can't see it, then you can also aim at the hatch like that. So you could just use a center reticle for things like that. If you have a high pen gun and the tank doesn't have a good solid lower plate like this Panzer does, you can pen the lower plate frequently with APCR or AP, depending on obviously the tank you're driving. You can always try and hit the lower plate and pen it. So it really depends on the distance the tank is from the wall. But again, this would be quite difficult for me to discern exactly the tank's layout because you don't get the outline. So in this case, you can easily be able to hit the lower plate there, and if it had a weaker lower plate, you'd be able to pen. If I start to aim at the lower plate now, I can't see it, but I can still see the hatch, which might be difficult at this distance to pen it successfully due to the fact that I'm a really, really low to the ground tank and this is a really tall tank. So it's actually quite difficult to pen the hatch from there, but you can sort of see how it works. Okay, so next I want to talk about how to sort of increase your armor on lower front plates. So here you can see the IS-4 is getting through me with AP rounds on my lower front plate. So you can actually increase the angle on your lower front plate by basically backing up against a little bit of rubble or anything like this, or a hill even, and you can increase the effectiveness of your lower front plate. And it disallows these tanks from shooting you. Your upper front plate usually has to be pretty good to get away with this, which is the 100 is. Now, the IS-4 will struggle to pen my upper front plate, but so maybe some TDs will pen you, but regardless, if there's a TD here, you really shouldn't be in this kind of situation anyway. They'll just cheese through your turret. Now, if someone does want to shoot heat through the turret, they still can, which you should be angling the turret away as well. But you can see that the IS-4 cannot get through the lower plate. So basically, it's artificially increasing the angle on your lower front plate, and baiting people. Now, if they did try to shoot your upper front plate, there is a chance that they could pen it if you make the angle way too extreme. The more height you get, the flatter you make it, the more likely they are to be able to pen. So as an example there, you can see, yeah. So the next thing I'm going to show you guys is how to use a bush to spot for yourself and then also withdraw from that bush in order to fire and not be lit. So you get your spot and then you pull back until you can no longer see through the bush and it's no longer transparent, and then you fire. And then you respot again. Now, if you were to spot from this position and then fire, if the enemy tank has a decent level of view range, you expose yourself to potential damage. All right, so we got the initial spot, and then let's just fire. See if it lights me. There we go. All right, so from this bush, I fire. You would never be this far up on this map, by the way. Please don't do this. This is just to show how the spotting works, right? So you do the spot, and then you back up. Bush is no longer transparent. You fire, and you're not lit. So this is really, really important because if you do your own spotting and you fire and you get greedy from this position, and yeah, you're gonna get lit. Such as, there we go. So yeah, it's really important that you guys do this because otherwise it's gonna get you shot and potentially killed, and there's no reason for it when you can just spot the opponent, back up, and fire. So all you have to do is wait until the bush is no longer transparent. So yeah, that's the end of the video, guys. I hope that you found it interesting and informative. If anything in specific was interesting or something maybe you didn't know before that you're excited to try out, please do let me know in the comments. It's always cool to see that sort of stuff. I mean, some of you may have known quite a lot of this, if not all of it. But some of you, I hope at least, will have found something interesting in the video. If you, of course, have any other suggestions, please do leave them in the comments of helpful tips and tricks. But this was supposed to be about simple ones, so obviously nothing too complicated. There are lots of videos that I can make on more specific microing and other things that are much more complex strategies that require a whole video of focus, but this was supposed to be little things you could pick up quite quickly. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.